And just so people know, we're not going to live stream this discussion to Facebook, but I will post it to our YouTube channel so you all can get to it later if you want to rewatch or share it or anything. Aaron and Chris, I think we can get started. I'll keep admitting people as they come in, but I'm all set here if you both are ready.
Very good. Welcome, everyone. This is the Iowa Farmers Union, and this is our normal lunch and learn time. But we are so grateful that we have a special message and special session for us today. And again, we are welcoming back Chris Marion to join us for our leadership and communication session. Chris, it's great to see you again.
Great to be with you all. I don't know that I need to introduce myself again, but if you weren't here last time, and I think I see a few faces that weren't here last time, I'm a communication specialist with Wisconsin Farmers Union, but I also have a very small farm in Blanchardville, which is a very tiny town of 800, about a little bit southwest of Madison. So I have a farm stay here. I raise sheep and do managed grazing. And right now I pick a lot of raspberries. We're in our fall raspberry. We have a couple of 100 feet of raspberries, and it's fall raspberry season. So it's very exciting.
Well, we're so grateful that this group has gotten together again, and it's so important for our Farmers Union folks to gather and to learn and to speak with a strong voice for your farm and your community and for the Farmers Union. Before we get started, let's do a couple Farmers Union announcements, and we'll begin our conversation in our session. So Christina, take us through some upcoming Farmers Union activities.
Yeah, so I only have a couple things for you guys, and I will drop the links in the chat. So the Farm Bill Road Show, new location, Tuesday, October 3rd at Grinnell College in Grinnell. So come out and join us. IFU is a co-host. It'll be a good evening. I think I read that maybe Donna Winburn is speaking, and I know she's in the audience. So you're going to see some Farmers Union folks. Aaron, will you be there at the Farm Bill Roadshow?
Yes, I will.
Awesome. So you guys can register, come out and see Aaron and Donna and listen to all of the great things happening. Also, we would invite you to order our Monopolies Taste Terrible t-shirt. You guys have probably seen this in some emails. Aaron has it on right now. So Aaron, if you want to do a little model around, yeah, there it is. Very exciting t-shirt. It's been described as a great conversation starter. Our treasurer said be prepared with an answer when you wear it in public because people will ask you about it. So that's what we love. Great starts to conversation. So I will put that link in the chat. If you order in the next couple of days, IFU will get 20% of the proceeds. So that's only for the month of September. So go ahead and get that done as soon as you can, either online or in stores at the Ray Gun store. I think that is everything I have. I'll invite Chris to talk about session 3 whenever she feels ready to do that. And I will drop the link for the next time we get together.
Great. All right. Well, I think I'll start sharing my screen. Does that sound good?
That sounds good. Thanks again, Chris, for being with us. And people had such wonderful things that they learned in session 1 and this one about crafting our message, our why into various messages for impact. It really follows well into our activity. So thanks again for being here with us.
Well, it's really fun to start learning some of your stories. It's very exciting. All right. Well, just a reminder of what we're up to. Hopefully you can see my screen. We're in part 2 of our Show Up, Speak Out series. So we're doing these virtual lunch and learns, and I think we're going to have a final in-person training at convention. That's still in process, but that's what we're thinking about. So this is the series, kind of the topics. You can register right now if you want. And this is where we're at today. We did a little bit of work together last time on finding our why, articulating our why, what we care about. And now we're going to fold that into a couple different kinds of messages and talk about how we can implement a tight why into a lot of different uses. So here we go. just a reminder, the world belongs to those who show up. So you guys are here and you're getting out and about telling your story, and you are gonna have an impact. Thank you for showing up. We're going to do a little review of what we hit last time. It would be great if you could have a pen and some paper in front of you, because we will do a little bit of work. If you're on the phone or in the car and you're not able to do it, I will send you out some worksheets that kind of follow along with what we've done. And if you want to get a little bit deeper on your own, you can do that with worksheets. So we talked about finding our why, and we did an exercise thinking about what makes us jump out of bed in the morning. What could we cry about at the drop of a hat? What could we stay up all night talking about? And I know that for many of you, that why has to do with agriculture and family farms and our food supply and our precious soil and water. And we want to make sure that you can get that core value belief articulated and out into the world, having an impact. So that's what we're working on. And then we took a little bit of time to think about a choice point, a story, a moment in time that sort of solidified that why for us. And we'll do a little bit of work on this. I just wanted to review what we had done last time. If you missed last time, don't worry. We're going to have plenty of time to work through those same things again. This is a photo that I think might resonate with a lot of you. Last time we heard a story in our time together about someone whose family had experienced a flood and what it did to the farm and how that mobilized them around issues of water and climate change and got them to get out and attempt to make a difference. And this photograph is a choice point, one that I think a lot of us can resonate with. This is selling the cows, the last day on the farm kind of photo. I didn't personally grow up in dairy, but I live in dairy country in Lafayette County, Wisconsin, and I have experienced this with my neighbors in the 20 years I've lived here, over and over and over again. And I think experiences like that have mobilized a lot of us to get involved with Farmers Union. So I'm going to share this movie. It's a bit long. Some of you might have seen it already. It's 8 minutes, just a warning. I think it's amazing, but this is a movie that will help us talk about our why, how we can use it to communicate, and how choice points, there's some great choice points in here. So I want us to watch this, and then we'll talk through it, and it will help us do our work together today. So sit back, enjoy. Hopefully, if you're not getting the sound okay, just send me a chat, but I think we ran it ahead of time and it should be working.
This is the farm that I run here in Holcomb with my family, my husband and our 2 boys. It's actually the farm that I grew up on. It was a dairy farm. My dad bought it when I was about 4 years old, and I grew up milking cows here in the old stone barn. And those were just the best memories that I have of my dad, were time spent in the barn together. But I remember I was in high school, and I think I had probably my whole life been thinking that's what I wanted to do, was grow up and, take over the farm. And we were in the milk house. We were washing the milkers. And Dad, I remember, was leaning against the pipeline, and he's like, I just don't think there's a future in this for you. The way that dairy farming is going in Wisconsin, it's really hard. And a big contributing factor to that is the monopolization in agriculture. And that, for me, having been at this for over a decade with him, was kind of soul crushing. That's what I really wanted to do in life. That's how I always envisioned raising my kids. But I think the realities are that, here in Wisconsin, we're losing a dairy farm a day, and we have some real changes that we need to make.
When I was young, a lot of the farms were, maybe 200 acres. There were homesteads all over the place dotting the countryside, and everyone had neighbors. More and more of those farms are disappearing completely. Those farms are being bought up. A lot of the houses are being raised and plowed over so that larger and larger farms can move in.
There's a concentration crisis in America. We've seen the collapse of a lot of family farms, first in hogs, and then we saw it in dairy, now we're kind of seeing it in beef. What the term farmer means is kind of loosey-goosey at this point. I mean, you have the one that's been in a family for generations, they have a few hundred head of cattle. Then you have mega corporate farms where you have 35,000 dairy cows owned by one person. Now, is that person a farmer? I would say no. And those people exploit the positive association a lot of Americans have with the notion of being a farmer. They're the ones that get the most of the farm bill money. They're the ones that get most of the handouts. They're the ones that are prospering under this model. The question is do we want Bill Gates to be the largest owner of farmland in America? What kind of farming system do we want?
Starting a farm is an immense undertaking. You have to learn how to produce what you want to produce. You have to figure out how to be your own marketing agent. If you want to get into agriculture, not only are you looking at razor-thin margins, a massive amount of skills that you need to develop, but you're also looking at trying to compete against basically Wall Street.
70% of our produce comes from 3 states. In the meat industry, it's been really consolidated down to the big 4, they call them. There are 4 companies processing 85% of beef in the US. Throughout the pandemic, we saw beef prices in the store actually rising. Meanwhile, animals that I was shipping to market were bringing in less money.
Farmers have it the hardest. They're being both squeezed on the input and output side. So when they buy their seeds, when they buy their fertilizer, a lot of that's super concentrated, so they're paying monopoly prices for it. And then when they go to sell, they're selling to monopolies. So not only are they overpaying, but then they're getting underpaid.
Until we can figure out a way to create a system where farmers are getting fair payment for their goods, we're going to continue to lose family farms in Wisconsin.
How this concentrated economic power shows itself is in labeling. When you see a label made in the US, you think, I'm buying beef grown in the US. This monopoly power is basically corrupted the political system where they're able to take meat from Brazil and slap a made in the USA label on it. And so most people don't realize it.
Marketers out there have gotten really, really good at making labels look like they're from family farms. You're going to see great pictures of, farm scenes, and even the names of brands are really tied into, pasture and grazing and things like that, or words like natural that you don't actually even know the meaning of.
You're needing to help the consumer understand how you're different than what they're seeing on the grocery store shelves. And that can be really tricky because these large companies have whole teams of people who are marketing experts, and they know exactly what the consumer wants to hear. When you're really small, you don't have the same sway. You can't make the same negotiation with leasing a tractor for a very small amount of money, or buying feed in such large lots that you can negotiate discount pricing.
We're running into issues now with something we call right to repair. Through the years, our equipment has become so much more advanced and so much more technology involved. You have to have an equipment dealer technician come out and work on your equipment. That means that you also have to wait on that technician to be able to get out to you. So in some cases, it's actually held up harvest for people. The cost has been astronomical, and they have fewer options where to go for those parts. The current food system right now is not serving farmers well. It's not serving laborers along the supply chain well. Honestly, it's not serving our consumers well if it's not healthful food. And I think we are at this kind of fork in the road where we can make some decisions that will either restore some vibrancy to rural America, or we can continue down the path that we're on.
I think the other thing to keep in mind too with this moment is how cyclical it is. I mean, we've been here before. A lot of this monopoly talk started in agriculture. I mean, it started with farmers a century ago being angry about the railroad monopolies, shortchanging them. The slaughterhouses shortchanging them. I mean, the first antitrust laws in the world come from farmers organizing.
There was this massive amount of consolidation, and the people rose up and they said no more of this.
That's the hope here now, is for farmers to lead, because they've led before.
We're in that moment again, and we have this huge opportunity.
I mean, change is already starting. This past summer, President Biden announced a big monopoly executive order, ordering a bunch of different government agencies to look at concentration. You're seeing bipartisan support right now to address the concentration we're seeing in the beef markets. You know, that is a big sign of hope.
Reach out to your legislators and demand some change, because I think we do need to get a little bit loud about this issue.
We have the laws we need on the books. We just need to be enforcing them.
A big step, I think, is really just educating ourselves as consumers. Join Farmers Union and pay attention to these issues, but also pay attention in the grocery store.
Buy from the local farmers. Work with your school district. I mean, it's one thing when I individually buy the right thing. Schools buy a lot of stuff. There's a lot of purchasing power. So, I mean, that's what I would encourage people to do, is really work with their local institutional buyers to buy the right thing. If we confront this problem, everyone kind of wins, from farmers to workers to the person who picks it, who processes it, who slaughters it, who transports it, who cooks it, who serves it. Guess what? They're in every congressional district in America.
I like to think that 10 or 15 years from now, I won't be sitting here in a position like my dad was, where he had to say that there wasn't a future on the farm. I want to be able to look my kids in the eye and say that they do have a chance to be farmers.
Well, what does everybody think? What did you think of that movie? That makes me tear up every time. Of course, those are my friends, and I know those kids. But I think all of us have those friends, and I think all of us know those kids. Any response that anybody wants to share? What I want you to look at, what I want you to feed back to me on right now, and if somebody could unmute, or a couple people, and just chime out, what was the choice point that was utilized in this movie? Can anybody articulate that?
Explain what you mean by choice point. I think I know, but I'm not sure.
Yeah. So that was one of the things we went over last time. And just to review, a choice point is a thing that happens to you. It's part of your personal story, and it changes your mind, or mobilizes you, or cements your commitment, or makes you who you are. It's basically the story that we can recall to help us get the fuel to work on the issues we care about. And it's the thing that creates our why, our core motivating values. So, Deborah, I bet you can. Oh, Karen.
Well, I think in that movie, the choice point for Danielle was, is she going to have a future on the farm or not? Her father says no. She feels strongly yes, she wants that. So she has to make a decision. Is she going to fight for it, or is she going to accept that fate?
Yes, very good. Someone else raised their hand. Did we have another idea that anybody wanted to? Trying to see. Karen.
I did have my hand raised, but Deborah articulated it very well. I had the same answer.
So the choice point there, the core story, Danielle, is who this movie is built around. And I want to let you know that this was paid for by a grant. These are professional videographers who put this together in a really compelling way. But what I want us to see together today is that Danielle has a story that she tells in a lot of different forms, and she's good at articulating it, and it is very powerful, and it moves people. And that's what we want to get to with our own stories. Danielle was not supposed to be on this video. It was meant to be shot at her farm, but we had someone else coming in who was going to tell their story, and they didn't come. And the film crew said, Danielle, why don't you tell us your story of how you got this farm? She's on her home farm now. And so what's interesting is Danielle is the, well, no longer, but she was formerly the communications director for Wisconsin Farmers Union. She's a trained journalist, but the reason she's working, she worked for The Country Today, which was an ag paper. Then she worked for Farmers Union. Now she's gone on to work for her rural energy co-op. The reason she's in this business writing about what she writes about is because she wants farm families to survive on the land. That's her motivating why. And her choice point, the moment that made her want to throw her weight behind that issue, was her dad saying he's no longer milking and sending the cows away. So that brings us to a little moment of practice time. If you have a paper in front of you, I wonder if you could articulate a why you're part of Farmers Union. Why do you IFU? The reason Danielle is involved in Farmers Union is because she had that experience and she doesn't want her kids to have it. Can any of you immediately at this moment recall a choice point that motivates you to be part of IFU? Or if you just can articulate why you're a part of IFU, I would love to have you share that with the group. Julia, you're unmuted. Did you want to share?
Yeah, I can go ahead and tell you. Hopefully you can hear me this time.
You sound great.
Okay, I'm on a different voice. So I was brand new to beekeeping. And I'd met Deborah. Somehow I got signed up to be an IFU member. And I went to a Farm and Food Lobby Day down at the state capitol. Yeah, I don't know how I ended up being a member, but that I know it happened. And because the Honey Producers Association disappeared, all their presence at the State House just disappeared once they got the state apiarist reestablished as a government position. They all disappeared. And so I was standing there in the basement of the Capitol and just thinking, this is so right. We need to have people here talking to their elect, talking to the staff. Why did the honey producers leave? They got their foot in the door, they got someone hired, and that was their way in to get more done, and they just left. And so I just decided right then and there, this is my group.
I love that. That's an awesome story. Does anybody else have a why you IFU story that you could share?
Yes. I think for me, during the 1980s farm crisis is when I got involved. My father had been involved for years with the NFO and other organizations. My grandfather before him, going back to the Great Depression. But we were going around to meetings about the farm crisis. And, there's a lot of people being helpful about the farm crisis who were not from the family farm movement and really didn't know the farmer's point of view and really didn't necessarily listen to the farmer's side of the issue. So there'd be a meeting that might get hospital people. One was at the hospital. There were of course the extension service. There was counselors, bankers, and whoever was on the committee, whatever their competence, their ability level, they would be asked the basic general questions and they'd give an answer, whether they knew anything or not. And so Gary Lamb, who was president of IFU at that time, he would show up at a number of these meetings and he would just tell the real story of what farmers had been saying about what the problem was for decades and what it was now and what our proposals were to fix it, what a transformative farm bill would be, etc. And that just really latched me on to Farmers Union.
I love that. I love that. I think when we just pause to think, we all have stories about why we care about these issues and why we're involved. And I'm hoping that as we go through this series together, we'll just take some of those moments to think about those stories. And I'm hoping that you are taking notes. Doesn't need to be whole full-blown thoughts. If you just jot down your ideas as we're going through, I think that we can really build that into something meaningful. Is there anyone else who'd like to share why you IFU? I see other people unmuted, but I don't know if that's intentional or not.
I can share.
All
This
right.
is Carol Hansen. I'm concerned about the carbon capture pipeline. And the more I learn about it, the more concerned I get. And when farmers don't sign easements, their land could be taken through eminent domain here in Iowa. And if we lose our property rights, we lose our freedom. And the other thing about the carbon capture pipeline is carbon dioxide displaces the oxygen, and it's very dangerous. There's actually, if there's a rupture, there's a kill zone around where the rupture occurs. And Summit, one of the 3 companies in Iowa that wants the carbon capture pipeline, is like 2 miles away from me. And I live in town, but I'm still concerned because depending on the wind direction, the temperature, the terrain of the land, that carbon dioxide can travel more than 2 miles, and it can actually kill people. So it's an existential threat to me.
Thank you for sharing that, Carol. My involvement in Farmers Union is similar in that I moved out to the country because I was very sick with rheumatoid arthritis. And within a couple years of farming and growing organically and living with clean water and clean air, I was completely healed. But I became aware that there was a large CAFO that wanted to come into my community and, start spreading. And we already had polluted wells in the surrounding areas. And my concern for water is what got me interested in really banding together with similar people of similar values so that we can get the word out. So thank you for sharing that. All right, well, let's move on. Whoops, wrong direction. And let's talk about how we take these moments, these stories, these whys, these motivating issues, and turn them into a story so that we can get others to care about them too and move along with us and show up at the Capitol and get our own people in there, just like Julia's apiary friends did. So in community organizing, there's a way of thinking about storytelling that I think is really useful and something that we can apply to a lot of different situations. And that's the self, us, now framework. Self is your story. And by your story, I mean your why, your core issue that you care about, combined with your choice point type of story, right? The moment in time that got you energized. And then you combine that with us. You want to think about who's your audience, who should care about this with you, and you want to tailor your story in a way that brings them in, that talks about, in Carol's case, the existential threat that this might pose to her neighbors. You want to articulate and do it before you're in front of a reporter or before you're writing your letter to the editor. You want to articulate who your us is, why the larger community should care. And finally, you want to be crystal clear about a now. And the now in this framework can also be thought of as the urgent need or the ask. What are you asking other people to do to come along with you? What do you want the end result of telling your story to be? We are here to talk about how we can communicate for impact. Impact can be all different kinds of things, but in this framework, we are considering what are we asking our audience to do with us. So we're going to be thinking about that as we go along. So I have another story to share with you. This was a news piece. Rachel Baressa actually briefly appeared in that last little film. She was at the table looking at her computer, trying to make her balance sheet work out. And she is here in this news piece being interviewed by a reporter during a field day that she was having at her place for my group, Wisconsin Women in Conservation. So she was teaching other women about managed grazing in this case, and the reporter covered it. And I wanted you to see this because this is a great example of using self, us, and now. It should come up. Can you guys see that?
Rachel Baressa is on her cattle farm near New London, doing what she loves. She works fast, stringing a new fence so her animals can feed on a fresh section of grass.
There's about 50 to 60 head, 21 babies this year. And then I also have yearling and finishing steers.
She's a fifth-generation farmer, but started this operation in 2015.
So that was 13 Angus steer with no perimeter fencing. I was 37 weeks pregnant and had a 2-year-old and chased animals probably over the neighborhood more than I would like to.
Now she's sharing her experiences and knowledge with the Wisconsin Women in Conservation.
What we aim to do is to bring women together, network, give them those connections between farmers, between resources, and then we help them achieve their dreams by bringing resources to them, and also kind of feel motivated, like looking at other people doing that.
My favorite thing to do is talk about farming with other farmers, especially when it comes to grazing and soil health. After the soil, our greatest resource as farmers is each other. That farmers learn best from other farmers who have gone through it and done it, and can speak from their personal experience.
The women watched a demonstration by the Natural Resources Conservation Service. It showed ways to combat soil runoff.
There are a lot of female-owned farms out there, and they haven't really been involved in a lot of our conservation programs in the past. So it's definitely important to get them in the door, feel involved, get them educated on what's out there to help farmers. And they're kind of an underserved group that we'd like to tap into.
Ready to run?
Baressa took the group on a tour of her land and fielded questions. She offered advice about getting into farming for those who may be on the fence.
Just don't be intimidated. There's other women farmers all over. There's other like-minded women. There's groups like this. There's resources available. And don't be intimidated. Do it. Get it.
If they're anything like Baressa, they'll be happy to talk about their farms and do it with passion. In New London, Savannah Tomei, Spectrum News.
All right. So what I'd love for us to talk about is whether we could see in this self, us, and now. This will help us as we're building our own self, us, and now story and template. And so anybody ready to chime in? Self, us, now. Bradley, you still have your hand raised, but I'm assuming that's not for this. Anybody want to jump in? Let's start with what, can you tell what Rachel's story of self is? What's her why? What's her core motivating issue? Anyone want to take a stab? What motivates Rachel?
I'm not sure what motivates her, but I know she talked about being pregnant and chasing animals around more than she should. That was part of her story about herself.
Yes, that's good. I would say that's a choice point. Rachel is I would say her why is grazing. She comes actually from a grazing family. So she grew up grazing when it wasn't that popular. Her parents were actually doing dairy grazing, and now she does beef grazing. But I think her choice point on why to do the fencing and to get more involved with programs is definitely that she did not have the infrastructure to pull it off when she was pregnant and with a couple kids. That's great. Rachel, I think, is a great example of someone who has her why in her back pocket. She teaches about this everywhere she goes. She's been asked to speak at a lot of things on managed grazing. It is just 100% who Rachel is. Rachel Baressa is managed grazing. And anybody who knows her knows that, just like anybody who knows me knows that water is my thing. And I'm pretty sure that some of you have similar things. Julia has her bees. We have these things that motivate us. Now, what is the us in this story? Who was Rachel's audience? Who was she talking to? Was she talking to the general public? Or who would you say who was she trying to bring along with her? Deborah?
Well, I would say other women farmers and people doing what she does.
Yep, exactly. She was very clear about, hey, you don't have to be intimidated. If you're a woman in ag and you want to go for it, go get it. She was clearly speaking to farmers and clearly speaking to women, although she speaks to men a lot on this topic. Yes, thank you. And I think she very compellingly brought other people into her story, right? The way she interacted with the reporter, she was clearly reaching out and saying, you can do this too. And what was her now? What do you think her urgent ask of people? What does she think is urgent in this?
So I can go.
Great.
So I don't know if Rachel's the one who said it, but there was another gal speaking, and she said women have often been left out of the conservation conversation, and we want to bring them in.
Yeah, that was awesome.
So because they've been excluded in the past, this is the best time.
Yes, perfect. That was the NRCS agent who was running the rainfall simulation. And right, so the now in this is, hey, you can do this, get in there and get it. We need women and all farmers to get on board with climate smart practices. So thank you. Exactly. Now, this is a good illustration of how we're going to work through some templates of self, us, and now, and how we use our story to fill that out. But it's not always going to be 100% perfect, right? But you can see the power of having these sort of sections of your story ready to go, so that when a reporter shows up on your farm, they come out pretty naturally. I want you all to know that I did not get to warn Rachel that this reporter was coming. So I'm the communications manager for this project, but so we had already set up the field with day. We had 40 some women there, but I told her when I got there, hey, this reporter called me last night. I've got him all set up. I've given him all this material. He's ready with questions. Do you mind if he interviews you? And she was like, yep, jump in the gator with me. And so she tore off with him in the gator. And that's how we got this really great footage. So I think it's really illustrative of how being prepared is super helpful. Now, she wasn't prepared day of, but she is prepared overall to tell this story in various forms all the time.
In a little bit, the printer's going to print off a...
Okay, so great job. Thank you for the feedback. Now we're going to take a minute, and if you don't have paper in front of you, that's fine. We're not going to take, you could spend hours on this, but we're just going to take a minute to jot some thoughts down. And I will send you this in a worksheet, in an email follow-up. But this is the kind of work that if you can do this ahead of time, you will be able to, like Rachel, like Danielle, when the moment comes, you're going to be ready with your core story, and you're going to be able to deliver it in a compelling way, and you're going to be able to bring people along. And that's our goal in this series, is to get you there. So if you could just take a minute, some of us have done some of this work already from the last one, but this is just pulling things together. I do think I sent this worksheet out already too, to the first group. But some people might be further along in thinking about this. You might be ready with this stuff right now. So let's just take a couple minutes to write down a sentence or two. Maybe you can't articulate your us right now, but maybe you could articulate a self. Maybe you could articulate a now or an ask. Just write some of these things down, and then we're going to share a little bit about that for just a few minutes. So I'm going to give you 2 minutes to write some things down, and then we'll regroup. Okay, so let's take a moment and see if anybody would like to share with us a short version of a self, us, and now.
Well, Chris, I can share something.
Thank
I'm
you.
not a farmer, but this is my experience that has kind of spurred me. As a Farmers Union employee, I set out one day to conduct interviews and film 3 farmers who raised hogs or used to raise hogs. And when I interviewed them, they were all across the state. So I had to travel in between. And each of these people was so deeply emotional to the point of tears when they described the loss of their hogs being put out of business by larger like CAFOs. And they raised their hogs like in the, traditional way and they just sobbed, and I couldn't use any of the footage, but that made me realize how much this meant to people in a way that I did not understand before. And so that was a huge eye-opener for me.
That is a great choice point example of why you are so committed to doing this work with Farmers Union. Do you think you could articulate a now along those lines? I mean, you did a great job sharing with us your fair experience. I think you're kind of talking about what's behind all of that motivation.
Well, when I see farmers being put out of business, like smaller family, not small, but medium to small family farmers being put out of business by big feedlot operations and CAFOs, and knowing that CAFOs get so many tax breaks that are not allowed for family farmers raising hogs in a traditional way, it ends up that they are subsidizing the people putting them out of business. And that just irks my sense of justice.
And so you want more people to sign up at the fair. Join us.
I want more people to sign a petition. I want them to lobby for moratorium. There's a whole bunch of things I want them to do.
Yeah, so that is
injustice.
I love that. That's a great illustration of a motivating choice point that contributes to your core why. Bradley, do you have your hand up because you want to answer?
Sure.
All right.
Part of my story for today anyways, that we have this awesome transformative farm bill of tremendous magnitude and integrative power, and hardly anybody knows about it today. Or rather, most often they do know about it, but they know about it falsely.
Mm-hmm.
They think that merely taking subsidies from farmers fixes things, instead of the fact that it's removing the need for subsidies. And so it's amazing how little this is known today, and how little people know that there ever was a family farm movement. Sometimes with mobilizing millions of, 1 million people in one 6-month period for NFO in the 60s. People don't know that any of that ever happened, were erased from history. And so they advocate, but they advocate, for CAFOs and for, even though their values and narrative is against those things, against agribusiness, they advocate for them because they don't know that cutting subsidies doesn't do anything to stop the cheap grain going to CAFOs. So my community, I mean, the first thing on my mind is train the trainers, because we have all these trainers out here who don't know any of this. And related to that is, those who do farm bill work, who don't know about the real farm bill, my community, and who do this reverse advocacy, such as the sustainable food movement, is the first one on my mind, because they would be the ones most receptive to doing the right thing and winning on these issues. And then secondly, farmers on the conservative side who, in a different way, do reverse advocacy against their own interests. And so, now ask, we have a 23 farm bill out there. People all over the place are asking for a transformative farm bill. And nobody knows, nobody has the answers. I just wrote a 16-page review of On Point show, public radio, NPR, and on the farm bill, and they kept asking this, and they didn't have anybody on who knew the answer or who would give the answer. And I'll just say one thing: they had Rob LaRue on, president of National Farmers Union, and he didn't mention that NFU has a farm bill proposal that was a hugely transformative proposal that the APAC found would save $100 billion over certain years, and they were asking for this over and over. He didn't even mention it, And the one question is, why is it NFU isn't mentioning this, And how do we get to the point where they'll feel comfortable mentioning it? So what a moment.
Yeah. I think you have a really clear now, and really we all do. And I love that IFU is doing the listening sessions about the farm bill, because that's how we affect change. We do education, we make clear asks, and we invite people to come along with us. And I think that is you guys are doing that, and I love it. I thank you for that, Bradley. Do you go by Brad or Bradley?
I do go by Brad. I don't know how Brad gets it. Probably my credit card. It's on my credit card.
Okay.
I would just say that.
Well, and I
think
something
that so many people want to know, such as related to farm subsidies, so that at our booth at the state fair, wow, how many people walk by that booth? Wow, and
right.
What might draw them in? I've had suggestions for a few years on things that might draw them in better. If they knew, hey, wait, we would like to, what do you think about the farm bill? What do you think about farm subsidies?
Right.
And, you know, give us away. And so.
Well, let's move along. I think that you'll appreciate this next section, and we only have about 8 minutes left together. So this is what our friends have just brought up here, shows that there are multiple ways that we have opportunities to leverage our stories into powerful places to exert impact. That includes writing and speaking. Bradley Wilson needs to write some letters to the editor, if he hasn't already, on this issue, because that's the perfect place to try and have impact with the crowd that you mentioned. Engaging with the media, saying yes to interviews, but being ready for them, that's another way. Social media, we're going to talk about that just briefly coming up, is a great way to practice bite-size pieces, crafting bite-sized pieces of your why, because we all know that folks are on social media. And finally, civic engagement. One of the things that we are leading up to with this series is your lobby day, which I think happens in February. And we want you to be ready with tight, effective, impactful elevator pitches, so that when you introduce yourself to your representatives, you've got your stories right at your fingertips. That's what we're working toward here. Another place that's similar is public hearings, and also just one-on-ones with thought leaders in your community. So we're going to talk about all that, but everything that we're doing is leading up to using your story effectively in these situations. So I want us to take a moment, and we won't take too long because we only have 5 minutes left, but this will be great homework for you to work on your personal elevator pitch. Now, we've talked about why. We've seen some people articulate their whys and their choice points. This is a template. It's a boilerplate that you can plug in to any one of those ways of communicating: written letters to the editor, interviews, beautiful movies like the one that Wisconsin Farmers Union got to make, podcasts, Facebook posts. But where it all starts is from a very tight personal message. And I want you to be able to get your why down to a 3 to 5 sentence elevator pitch about yourself. The reason this is important is because you might have a situation like my friend Jill did. She was at a game, a Brewers game, and she saw her senator come out of the bathroom. Now, Jill is very involved on the school board, and she has a lot of opinions about a lot of things. And when that senator came out, she wanted to thank him for a bill that he had championed. But she had to connect with him very quickly because he's off to go see the game, right? And so she saw him going to the bathroom. She thought through what she was going to say, and she waited till he came out. And when he came out, she was ready to say, "Hi, I'm Jill Gaskell. I'm the president of the Pecatonica School Board, and I really wanted to thank you for your advocacy on Bill XYZ, and I hope that you will continue to forward bills like that in the future." Do you see where an elevator pitch can be very useful when you get a surprise opportunity? That is just one example of why I want us to work on this. So we're going to move on, but I will send you this, and I really hope that you'll do it. We can build on this in the next. We maybe have time for, does one person feel like they have a very short, a very concise, a ready elevator pitch that they could share with the group? It's okay if you don't, because I'm springing it on you. Aaron's laughing. What about you, Aaron? Do you have a quick elevator pitch? Like if you were to introduce yourself to a table of other nonprofit leaders?
I would. I'll do a real quick one.
Awesome.
If you want. Okay.
I would love that.
So, hello. My name is Aaron Lehman. I farm in Northern Polk County, and I sit on the Leopold Center board for advisory board. And there's a proposal to disband this board, but this is a great way that we interact with the Leopold Center for Sustainable Agriculture and tell us what our farmer priorities are. So please stand up and ask that we keep the advisory board for the Leopold Center.
Ah, perfect. I love that. Now, Aaron's example there is pointing to this issue that we will have slightly different elevator pitches for different times, right? We're not always walking around with a burning feeling about the school board, but we need to be, in general, ready to craft a short pitch to communicate with someone. And, you know, it's just to pique their curiosity. And you're hoping that they'll ask a question back and then you'll learn about them, right? You're just trying to start a back and forth. But if you start from a core value, you're going to be able to have a lot more impact in a lot quicker fashion. And that's what we want. We just want to be ready. So we're going to quickly talk about why I'm hoping that you will do your homework and put some effort into crafting your own personal elevator pitch. Here are some quick outlines, and you'll notice that an elevator pitch for a speech, an interview, and a one-on-one is the core of any of those things. When we are going out into the world and we want to have impact, the first thing is to be prepared. The second is to practice. And the third, and this is something that so many of us forget, is to prune. It's really hard to keep things short, but the best way to do that is to prepare ahead of time and to have already made our cuts and our edits to our message ahead of time. I'm not proposing that you carry a piece of paper around, although you could, or have your elevator pitch on the phone. But if you've done the work ahead of time, it's going to be a lot easier. So I'm just going to cover in the next minute or two, so that we get out of here roughly on time, ways that we can practice using our elevator pitch. Social media, if you're on it, is a great way to have influence and to practice articulating your why, your story, your elevator pitch, and make the ask to your audience. I would encourage you, if you're on social media, to begin using that to expand on your personal story, your elevator pitch. A great way to start also after that is to write letters to the editor, op-eds, blogs. I'm pretty sure IFU has places where you can have these things published. And these are really important. You know that farmers are 1% of the population, and newspaper editors also know that. They love to hear our stories. And if you send something, it will almost always be published. Danielle, who we saw in that first movie, she had a letter to the editor. Actually, it was more of a longer op-ed, and that was published, I think, all over the place in Wisconsin and nationally. It was the same story that we heard on the movie, and she's leveraged that into several good op-eds. An op-ed is generally longer. A letter to the editor almost always has to be very short. So keep that in mind. If you're sending a letter to the editor to a newspaper, they almost always have limits on length. So this is where doing the work to prune your message down is really, really important. And here is a quick template. If you want to work on writing your story, I'll send this to you in a worksheet form. But you start with your elevator pitch and you expand that into something that establishes your credibility, why people should care about what you have to say. You're going to think about who your audience is, who your us is. And then, this is very important, never try to make more than 1 point in a story, a letter to the editor, an op-ed, a blog post. 1 point backed up with 2 or 3 data points. Repeat that point at the end, and then make a very clear ask as to what you want your audience to do. And again, this, which is what we looked at before, is how this is the raw information that you will fold into any written piece. Always remember that your stories matter. Taking the time to craft your story is time well spent. We need you, and we need your stories, because the world belongs to those who show up. Here's how you can reach me. If you have any questions, I will be sending out some follow-up worksheets, and I'll see you at part 3, where we'll talk about how you can be ready to interact with the media.
Well, that's excellent, Chris. Thank you so much. And you've given us some good things to think about, some good things to be working on, and some good momentum for moving us towards being strong voices for our family farmers, for sustainable agriculture, and for our communities. So thank you, Chris, and we'll look forward to our next session, folks. So thanks everyone for being here. Thank you, Christina, for bringing us together through this format, and we'll look forward to seeing people at our next Lunch and Learn, which will be next Thursday at our regular time at 12:30. So
can you tell us what date the next session of this is? Say it again, sorry.
yes, let's say one more time. It's Thursday, October 12th, so in 2 weeks. And we put the registration link in the chat as well, so folks can go there right now and register for it. And of course, we'll be circulating that information in your email box as well. So we'll look forward to seeing everyone in 2 weeks.
Wonderful. Register now. See you soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Everyone.